A wealthy widow entered the boardroom, but she wasn't alone. Walking beside her wasn't a high-powered executive, a lawyer, or a financial expert. It was a janitor. What happened next left everyone in the room speechless. 1. The unexpected guest. The conference room of Kingston Enterprises was filled with a tense silence. The long glass table gleamed under the overhead lights, surrounded by executives dressed in immaculate suits, their faces marked with skepticism. This was no ordinary meeting. It was a high-stakes discussion that could determine the future of the company. The financial reports had not been promising, and today's gathering was meant to strategize a recovery plan. But when the heavy doors swung open, revealing Victoria Kingston, the owner and CEO, no one expected what followed. Walking beside her was not a high-ranking advisor, nor a corporate strategist. Instead, it was a janitor, a man dressed in a simple navy blue jumpsuit, still holding a cleaning rag in one hand as if he had just been pulled from his shift. A ripple of whispers spread through the room like an electric current. Some executives exchanged glances, while others straightened in their seats, trying to suppress their confusion. Marcus, the janitor, shifted uncomfortably, clearly aware of the stares fixated on him. Jonathan Wells, the CFO, cleared his throat, his tone carefully polite but edged with disbelief. "Mrs. Kingston, is there a reason?" Victoria raised a hand, cutting him off. "I invited him." The room fell into an uneasy silence once more. Marcus hesitated, glancing at Victoria as if to ask if he could leave. She offered him a reassuring nod, urging him forward. He swallowed hard and stepped further into the room, every movement feeling out of place in the sea of tailored suits and polished shoes. For years, Marcus had walked these halls unnoticed. He had been nothing more than the man who scrubbed the floors and emptied the trash bins. But today, for the first time, every pair of eyes was locked onto him. Jonathan shifted in his seat. "Forgive me, Mrs. Kingston, but this is a critical meeting regarding the financial future of Kingston Enterprises. I fail to see how his presence is relevant." Victoria's lips curled into a knowing smile. It wasn't a warm one. It was the kind of smile that told you she was 5 steps ahead of everyone in the room. "Relevance," she repeated, tilting her head slightly. "That's an interesting word, Jonathan. Tell me, what makes someone relevant in this room?" Jonathan hesitated, sensing the trap. "Well, experience. Expertise." He gestured vaguely to the room. "A background in finance." Victoria nodded slowly, as if considering his words. Then she turned to Marcus. "Tell me, Marcus, how long have you worked for Kingston Enterprises?" Marcus cleared his throat, his voice quiet but steady. 9 years, ma'am." 9 years, Victoria repeated. "That's longer than most of the people in this room, wouldn't you say?" A few executives shifted uncomfortably. She wasn't wrong. The company had a high turnover rate among its top-level staff. Victoria continued, her voice calm but firm. "Marcus has seen this company from a perspective none of us have. He walks these halls every day, unnoticed, but paying attention. And in those 9 years, he has observed something important enough that I asked him to be here today." Marcus stiffened. He hadn't expected to speak, and his grip tightened on the rag in his hand. He felt the weight of every gaze pressing down on him, waiting for him to fail. His throat went dry. This was a mistake. He didn't belong here. Victoria must have sensed his hesitation because she gave him an encouraging nod. "Marcus," she said gently, "tell them what you told me." The room was so silent. He could hear the faint ticking of the antique clock on the far wall. He took a deep breath. His father's words echoed in his mind. "Opportunity doesn't wait for you to be ready. You take it, or you lose it." So he took it. "Well," Marcus started, his voice low at first, but gaining strength with every word, "I've been here long enough to see how things really work. I see which departments waste resources. I see where money goes that doesn't need to. And I read the financial reports when I find them in the trash." A murmur of disbelief swept across the room. One executive let out a chuckle, but Victoria's expression didn't waver. "Go on," she said. Marcus swallowed. "Last month, I found a report showing that the company's logistics costs have been rising every quarter. I started looking into it, and it didn't add up. We've been outsourcing distribution, but we're underutilizing our own fleet. We're paying premium rates for services we already have the infrastructure for. Jonathan leaned forward slightly, a flicker of interest replacing his skepticism. That's a bold statement. What makes you think our internal fleet is underutilized? Marcus hesitated for only a moment before replying. Because I clean the fleet garages every night. Half the trucks sit unused for days at a time. Meanwhile, the company is paying millions for third-party distribution. A silence settled over the room. Executives glanced at one another, some shifting uncomfortably. Alyssa Chun, a senior analyst, pulled out her tablet and started scrolling. Victoria folded her arms. And what do you suggest we do about it? Marcus exhaled slowly. Reevaluate the outsourcing contracts. Adjust fleet operations. Cut external distribution by at least 30%. If we optimize routes, we can save at least $8 million annually. Alyssa looked up from her tablet, her voice quiet but firm. He's right. The weight of her words crashed over the room like a tidal wave. The very people who had dismissed Marcus minutes ago were now staring at him with something new in their eyes. Respect? Victoria smiled. That's why he's here. Jonathan leaned back in his chair, tapping a pin against the table. I'll admit, I didn't see this coming. Victoria smirked. That's the problem, Jonathan. Too many people in this company don't see what's right in front of them. Marcus looked around the room, his nerves finally settling. He had stepped into a world he never thought he belonged in. But as he watched the executives nodding, reconsidering, discussing his idea as though it mattered, he realized something. Maybe he did belong here after all. 2. The discovery of hidden talent. The boardroom remained eerily silent as Victoria's words settled over the group. Eyes flickered toward Marcus, the janitor who had just delivered insights no one had expected. Despite the tension in the air, Victoria remained poised, her sharp gaze scanning the room. Marcus, however, was still adjusting to the weight of attention on him. Just a few hours ago, he had been scrubbing floors in the very same building. Now, he was standing at the epicenter of one of the most critical business discussions in Kingston Enterprises history. It hadn't started this way. For years, Marcus had been invisible, a quiet observer of the corporate world that bustled around him. But he had a secret. It all began years ago, when he was a boy sitting at his father's small kitchen table. His father, a small business owner, had taught him the art of finance, not through textbooks, but through lived experience. He learned how to read market trends, analyze business costs, and make long-term financial projections. But life had taken an unexpected turn. When his father passed away, Marcus lost more than a parent. He lost his future. Forced to drop out of college due to financial hardship, he took on jobs that had nothing to do with his potential. Janitorial work had been meant to be temporary, just a way to survive. But days turned into months, and months into years. Yet, Marcus had never stopped learning. While mopping floors and emptying trash bins, he paid attention. He overheard executives debating investment strategies in hallways. He caught snippets of financial reports left behind in meeting rooms. And when no one was looking, he read every document he could find. At night, in the janitor's closet, he used his phone to track stock trends and read articles on corporate strategy. And now, for the first time, all of it was being recognized. Jonathan Wells, the CFO, cleared his throat. So, Marcus, he began, attempting to maintain his usual air of authority. You claim that our logistics costs are inflated because we're outsourcing when we have the internal capacity to handle distribution? Marcus nodded. Yes, sir. Jonathan scoffed. And you figured this out from, what? Reading financial reports you found in the trash? Marcus held his gaze steady. I've read dozens of them, and they all show the same patterns. Alyssa Chun, the senior analyst, was still scrolling through her tablet. Her brows furrowed as she cross-checked numbers. I hate to say it, but he's not wrong, she murmured. The murmurs in the room grew louder. Some executives still appeared doubtful, but others leaned in, intrigued. Victoria tapped her fingers against the table. Jonathan, tell me, when was the last time any of you walked through our distribution facilities? Seen how many trucks actually move out each day? Jonathan hesitated. Marcus took the opportunity. I clean the garages every night, he said. I know exactly how often the trucks are used. Half the fleet sits untouched for days while you pay outside firms millions to do what we could do ourselves. Alyssa suddenly looked up. Wait, she said, eyes wide. I just ran a model. If we reintegrate even 30% of distribution into our internal fleet, we save at least $8 million annually. A hush fell over the room. Jonathan opened his mouth, but no words came out. He exchanged a glance with Martin, another high-level executive, who looked equally stunned. Victoria smirked. That's why Marcus is here. The silence lingered before Martin let out a sharp laugh. This is insane, he said. Are we seriously considering business advice from a janitor? Victoria's smile didn't waver. We're considering business advice from someone who saw what none of you did. Martin crossed his arms. Even if he's right, there's a difference between spotting a problem and actually implementing solutions. Victoria turned to Marcus. Are you ready to prove them wrong? Marcus inhaled deeply. Every logical part of his brain told him to back down. This wasn't his world. But another voice, his father's, whispered in his mind, you don't wait for permission. You take the opportunity. So he nodded. Yes, I am. Victoria leaned back, satisfied. Then here's what we're going to do. Marcus, you will work directly with Alyssa and Jonathan to run new projections and present a proposal for optimizing our logistics. You have 1 week. Jonathan sat up straight. A week? Victoria arched a brow. I trust Marcus will manage. Alyssa, still watching Marcus with interest, gave him a small nod. I'll help. Marcus exhaled. This was happening. The janitor was now part of the inner circle of Kingston Enterprises, crafting financial strategies that could change the company forever. As the meeting adjourned, Marcus caught Victoria's eye. Why are you doing this? He asked quietly. Victoria smiled, but this time, it was warm. Because talent doesn't come with a title, and because someone, somewhere, once took a chance on me. Marcus nodded. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a janitor anymore. He felt like someone who mattered. 3. Proving his worth. A heavy silence settled in the boardroom. The atmosphere had shifted. What had started as skepticism had morphed into something else, something more dangerous for the executives who had been quick to dismiss Marcus. Now, they were faced with an undeniable truth. The janitor they had overlooked for years had just identified a critical flaw in their financial strategy, one that could save the company millions. Jonathan Wells, the CFO, was the first to speak. His voice, though steady, carried an edge of disbelief. All right, he said, adjusting his tie. Let's assume you're right about the logistics inefficiencies. You still haven't answered the most important question. How do you propose we implement these changes? Marcus felt the weight of every gaze in the room pressing down on him. A week ago, he was scrubbing the floors in this very building. Now, he was standing at the center of a high-stakes discussion, his credibility hanging in the balance. He took a deep breath. First, we need a full audit of our internal fleet utilization. Right now, we're outsourcing distribution to third-party contractors while our own trucks sit unused for days at a time. We need real-time data on fleet capacity, usage rates, and cost comparison with outsourcing expenses. Alyssa Chun, the senior analyst, nodded thoughtfully. That's doable, but it would require restructuring our logistics reporting system. Jonathan crossed his arms. And what about supplier contracts? We can't just cut outsourcing overnight. Marcus had anticipated this argument. I'm not saying we eliminate outsourcing entirely. We phase it out strategically. Start with a 30% reduction in third-party contracts while gradually reallocating those shipments to our internal fleet. That alone will save us millions annually without disrupting operations. Murmurs swept across the room. Some executives leaned forward, intrigued. Others exchanged wary glances. Martin Caldwell, one of the most senior board members, scoffed. That sounds great in theory, but do you have any idea how complex corporate logistics are? This isn't as simple as moving boxes from one place to another. Marcus didn't flinch. With all due respect, Mr. Caldwell, I've spent years watching this company operate. I may not have had a seat at this table, but I've paid attention. Every night while cleaning, I've listened to conversations, reviewed reports left behind in conference rooms, and observed the inefficiencies firsthand. The data is there. It's just been ignored. Victoria Kingston, who had been silent up until now, smiled. It was the kind of smile that made people nervous. You make an excellent point, Marcus. She turned to the rest of the executives. Let's be honest. How many of you have personally examined the logistics reports Marcus is referring to? Silence. Not a single hand went up. Victoria leaned back. That's what I thought. Jonathan exhaled, his fingers tapping against the table. Fine. Let's say we move forward with this plan. Who do you propose leads this initiative? Without hesitation, Victoria answered, Marcus. The boardroom erupted. Absolutely not, Martin snapped. This is ridiculous. Jonathan shook his head. Victoria, this is $1 billion company. We can't put a janitor in charge of a major financial overhaul. Victoria raised an eyebrow. A janitor who just pointed out an inefficiency none of you noticed. Marcus swallowed hard. He hadn't expected this. He had assumed, at best, they would take his ideas and implement them under someone else's leadership. The thought of actually overseeing the execution of his own proposal was daunting. He started, but Victoria cut him off. You can do this, she said, her voice firm. You have the knowledge, the insight, and the drive. And more importantly, I trust you. Marcus took a deep breath. He had spent years believing he didn't belong in rooms like this. But today, for the first time, he felt different. I'll do it, he said finally, but I'll need support. Victoria nodded. Alyssa, you'll work with Marcus to collect the necessary data. Jonathan, you'll oversee the financial aspects. And Martin, she smirked, I expect your full cooperation. Martin's face darkened, but he knew better than to argue with Victoria. Jonathan sighed. All right, 1 month. You have 1 month to prove this works. Marcus nodded. That's all I need. As the meeting adjourned, executives filed out, still murmuring among themselves. Some were skeptical, some impressed, but Marcus didn't care about their opinions anymore. He had something more valuable, an opportunity. Victoria stayed behind, watching Marcus with an unreadable expression. You surprised me today, she admitted. Marcus chuckled. I surprised myself. She tilted her head. Why didn't you ever apply for a higher position before? He hesitated before answering. Because I didn't think I'd be given a chance. Victoria's expression softened. You were lied to, Marcus. Talent doesn't need permission. You belong here. For the first time in years, Marcus believed it. And now, it was time to prove it to everyone else. 4. A life-changing opportunity. As the meeting adjourned, Marcus sat in silence, his heart still pounding from what had just transpired. The reality of the situation was beginning to sink in. He wasn't just a janitor anymore. He had just been entrusted with a responsibility that could change the trajectory of his entire life. But along with that opportunity came a wave of uncertainty. Could he really do this? Victoria Kingston lingered behind while the executives filed out, some still murmuring about the shock of the meeting. She watched Marcus closely, reading the hesitation in his expression. You're thinking about walking away, she said, breaking the silence. Marcus looked up, startled. I don't know if I can do this, he admitted, his voice quieter than before. Victoria folded her arms. Tell me why not? He exhaled, running a hand through his short-cropped hair. Because I've spent my entire life believing I wasn't meant for something like this. That people like me don't get chances like this. A knowing smile crossed Victoria's face. And what makes you think that belief is the truth? Marcus didn't have an answer. Victoria leaned against the table, studying him. Listen to me, Marcus. You spotted a flaw in this company that people with Ivy League degrees and decades of experience missed. You saw it because you were paying attention, not because of some fancy title. That's what matters. He swallowed hard. But what if I fail? She smirked. Then you learn, and you get back up. But I wouldn't have given you this opportunity if I thought you were going to fail. Marcus nodded slowly, still absorbing everything. This was a defining moment. He had always dreamed of something bigger, of a life beyond the fluorescent-lit hallways and cleaning supplies. And now, for the first time, he had a choice. Stay in the shadows, or step forward and take control of his destiny. He took a deep breath. All right, he said, his voice steadier. I'll do it. Victoria nodded approvingly. Good. Because your first day starts tomorrow? The next morning, Marcus stepped into the Kingston Enterprises headquarters, but this time, he wasn't carrying a mop or wearing his janitor's uniform. Instead, he wore a simple but well-fitted suit that Victoria had arranged to be delivered to him. It wasn't anything extravagant, but it was the first time he had ever worn something that made him feel like he belonged in an office rather than outside of it. As he stepped off the elevator onto the executive floor, the energy felt different. People noticed him now. Some gave him approving nods, while others eyed him with skepticism. He could hear the hushed whispers. "Isn't that the janitor? Why is he here? This must be a joke." He squared his shoulders and kept walking. He wasn't here to prove anyone wrong. He was here to prove himself right. Waiting for him by the conference room was Alyssa Chen, the senior analyst who had been the first to verify his numbers the day before. She gave him a small, unreadable smile before handing him a stack of reports. "Hope you're ready," she said. "They're not going to go easy on you." Marcus took the papers, scanning through the data quickly. "Good," he replied. "I wouldn't want them to." Alyssa arched an eyebrow, as if reassessing him, then pushed open the door. Inside, Jonathan Wells, Martin Caldwell, and several other senior executives were already seated. The atmosphere was tense, but Marcus refused to let his nerves show. Jonathan cleared his throat. "All right, Marcus," he said, his voice neutral but firm. "Victoria wants you to present your cost-saving strategy for logistics. Let's see what you've got." This was it. Marcus set his reports down on the table, took a steadying breath, and began speaking. He started by outlining the inefficiencies he had observed, explaining them in a way that was both logical and practical. He detailed the unnecessary outsourcing costs, the underutilized internal fleet, and the millions that could be saved with proper restructuring. To his own surprise, he didn't feel out of place. He had spent years reading these reports in secret, absorbing every detail. Now, standing here, it all made sense. As he spoke, he noticed a shift in the room. The skepticism in some executives' eyes began to fade, replaced by reluctant interest. Even Martin Caldwell, who had been the most resistant to his presence, was now leaning forward slightly, listening. When Marcus finished, there was a beat of silence before Jonathan leaned back in his chair, expression unreadable. "Well," he said slowly, "that was impressive." Alyssa was still scanning her tablet, checking his calculations. She nodded. "The numbers check out." Martin let out a slow exhale, rubbing his temples. "I can't believe I'm saying this, but we need to consider this seriously." Victoria, who had been watching quietly, finally spoke. "Which is why Marcus will continue leading this initiative." There was no eruption of protest this time. The executives had seen the proof. They had heard the logic. And despite their initial biases, they couldn't deny that Marcus had earned his place at the table. Jonathan exhaled sharply. "All right. You have 3 months to implement Phase 1. We'll monitor progress closely." Marcus nodded. "Understood." As the meeting adjourned, Victoria caught up to him. "You handled yourself well in there." Marcus let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Thanks." She gave him a knowing look. "Still think you don't belong?" Marcus thought about it for a moment before shaking his head. "No, I think I do." Victoria smirked. "Good. Now prove it." For the first time in his life, Marcus wasn't just a janitor. He was someone with a future, one he had built with his own determination and talent. And this was just the beginning. Lessons from the story. 1. Talent is everywhere. Skills and intelligence are not confined to job titles or formal education. True talent can be found in unexpected places, waiting for an opportunity to shine. 2. Never underestimate yourself. Marcus spent years doubting himself, thinking he didn't belong. But when given the chance, he proved that knowledge and experience matter more than labels. 3. Pay attention to opportunities. Life doesn't always present chances in obvious ways. Sometimes, the key to success is simply being prepared when the right moment comes. 4. Leadership is about recognizing potential. Victoria saw value where others saw insignificance. True leaders uplift and empower those who have been overlooked. 5. Hard work and preparation lead to success. Marcus didn't get lucky. He was ready. His years of learning and observing made him capable of seizing the opportunity when it arrived. Personal perspective on the story. This story is a powerful reminder that people often go unnoticed, not because they lack ability, but because they lack opportunity. Many individuals are stuck in jobs that do not reflect their true potential. However, preparation and perseverance can change everything. If you find yourself feeling overlooked, remember Marcus's journey. Your moment could come when you least expect it. And when it does, be ready. Victoria's leadership also teaches us the value of seeing beyond the surface. In every workplace, school, or community, there are hidden gems, people with great ideas, insights, and knowledge who simply need a voice. If we take the time to listen and recognize them, we create a world where more people have the chance to contribute meaningfully. If you love stories that inspire, uplift, and remind us of life's most valuable lessons, then don't forget to subscribe to Story Precious. Our channel brings you incredible real-life and fictional stories that will make you think, reflect, and grow. Subscribe now and turn on notifications to never miss an inspiring video. Comment below and share your thoughts. We love hearing from our amazing community. Share this video with friends and family who need a little motivation today. Thank you for watching Story Precious, where every story is a precious lesson.